Howdy howdy, Sue Devil here. In this episode of Essential Units, we're going to revisit some of the things we've already taken a look at and look at some different ways to use them. I've had some requests for testing on the Iron Drakes, and I've definitely found a really fun use for them. Although I don't know if it's the most effective, but it's definitely fun. And one of the things I've discussed before in my Essential Units is that although we're going to be looking at units that are going to be really statistically the best picks for the dwarves, most people, well, some people will be like me in that, you know, they don't care that the dwarves are a fairly weak faction, and they might not care that a unit is weak. They just really think it's a fun unit and want to play it. So I really do want to point out some good ways to make use of units that you want to play. We're also going to take another look at the Gyrocopter. I was watching ASG Arya's channel. He goes by Wowasg online, has been a top 100 player and has some fantastic videos. You have to go check out his channel for sure. I'll put a link below so you can see it. He just has some really cool setups, and how he controls his gyrocopters was kind of like an aha moment for me, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. And they're just so much more effective when you control them in this matter. We're going to take a look at the Master Engineer as some possible uses we can have for him in competitive play. We'll see what you think, but I think there is something really beneficial we can get out of him. And finally, we're going to take a look at some infantry units. Specifically, we're going to take a look at maybe not the units in specific, but the tactical method in which you engage your units, and does it make a difference? And we're going to take a look and see how that all plays out. This first set of tests here is with the Iron Drake. I have to give a shout out to Kangaroo80, who suggested some more testing on Dwarf Flame units, and this one is specifically for him. And I basically wanted to simulate a Dwarf Death Star and see how good those Iron Drakes could do in my back line. Now, I've added them to my anti-vampire roster, and I wanted to set it up as good as possible. I brought Thorgrim and my Runesmith like I normally would, and just set up in the corner here so I could kind of get a Death Star. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. I will note that both of the Vampire Lords, I did give them the regenerative passives, so they are regenerating a ton of health, and I gave them both Invocation of Nehek, because I really wanted to see, I wanted to give as tough a test as possible to see what those Iron Drakes could do. And in a few of the tests I did, it can be a little tricky to place your Iron Drakes. You see I'm moving them there because they can shoot over the heads of your own units if they're shooting against monstrous infantry, something a little bigger, but they say wouldn't be able to do it if they were just hitting the Karen Wraiths, or they're really wonky. You got to have them at a high angle to do so. So I set them up like that because that will, I mean, the damage will be just fine against the Karen Wraiths, and it will stop the regeneration of the Crypt Horrors, which should dampen some of that healing. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll just put the rest of the battle on fast forward, and we can see what the end plates look like. I will say, no matter what the results, those Iron Drakes are fun to use, and they're not that expensive. They're only 900, and you know, they're a pretty fun little unit. I had actually put them in my army to deal with Fellbats, because one of the things that, even with your own front line or against Fellbats, to protect my Gyrocopters, all the dwarf infantry and units have high armor, and these flame weapons do not affect units with high armor, or they're very, very little. So I'm not going to take a whole lot of damage, whereas if I have Quarrelers shooting into Fellbats with my Gyrocopters there, they do tend to hit my Gyrocopters and hurt them, but the flame cannon, or not the flame cannon, the Iron Drakes don't, which is a fantastic little use for them. I mean, I think anyways. So at the end of the battle, you can see they ranked up, which is fantastic. They did a ton of damage, and just one of the other things I had going is I did put Thorgrim in against the Karen Wraiths as I normally would, and I was using the Rune of Wrath and Ruin with my Runesmith, but these armies were approximately the same cost, so it's a reasonable representation of what would happen in an actual battle. I think if you had the actual Death Star where they were all clumped up, those Iron Drakes would be devastating. They would be absolutely crushing and could be an extremely good unit in that scenario. For my next test, I actually replaced Thorgrim Grudgebearer with a Master Engineer and an extra set of Iron Drakes. Now, they're about equivalent in cost, but I know what you're thinking. You know, Zoo Devil, you've lost it, man. All the study on the Master Engineer has sent you over the edge. Come back, you don't have to do it. For God's sake, think of the children, Zoo Devil. But au contraire, mon petit chou. This army, I don't know how to say it in English, but it has a certain je ne sais quoi. Now, the key element to this army makeup is actually the Master Engineer's buffs. He's not going to get any shots, but his buffs do add damage, explosive damage, and when he hits that 40-second ability where it allows your ranged units to reload 40% faster, these Iron Drakes go to town on the Cryptors, and they can literally out DPS any of the healing that can be done to them. Plus, it shuts down their regeneration, so it's really effective. I always try and find ways to make I'm trying to find ways to make some of the weak characters useful, or find things that are positive about them, and I often say, well, there's no good use for them, but that really means that I don't know any good use for them. But you can see in this battle, like, if you just look at the stats at the end, with that army makeup, we actually took about 10% less total damage to our own troops, and we finished the battle a minute earlier, so maybe there's something to it. Now, for this next set of tests, I'm just looking at a better way to use Gyrocopters, and that is usually when I do my bombing runs, I just kind of send them over and drop my bombs. But if you see, you can use your Alt and Select and your Control keys to rotate and just put them exactly over top of whatever you're trying to bomb, and drop your bombs at will and start the unit routing. It's a fantastic way to use them. I'm going to use it nonstop. Well, every time I remember, at the very least, rather than trying to drive over a unit and drop my bombs just using timing to do it. This is 100 times better. And like I said, go take a look at Wowasg's channel. It's fantastic, and he uses this to great effect. Now, the other thing on Wowasg's channel is how you set up your gyros. Now, if you look here, if you just set them up so that they're facing each other, or whatever configuration you want, then all you got to do is group them and then lock the group, and whenever you move them, they will move to that position. That way you could set them up to have firing position. So you can see right there, I'm just going to center them over top of the artillery so they can be about evenly spaced, and away you go. They will go to that location and shoot at the unit from both angles, which you get your front and rear attacks, so it hurts their morale. Their morale just dumps so fast, and you can route units really quickly like that. And it's just a much easier way to manage and control your gyrocopters. This next set of tests is just to try and find another use for the Master Engineer. Now, if you've seen my channel, you know that I use the Thunders for anti-Lord duty all the time. And one of the things that you can use that Master Engineer for is his 40-second buff of basically increasing your DPS by 50% to put some real surprise damage onto an enemy lord. And I gave this lord potions. I wanted him to be as tough as possible, but you can see my Thunders can't quite handle him. They eventually get him, but let's go see what happens when we use the engineer buff. So here we have the buff ready to go off, and I have it active, and we'll see if we can stop the lord before he gets to our lines. Now, I don't think I fast forward this one, but the damage these guys put out is already really good. But with that 40-second buff, man, you can just catch people off guard. Look at how fast his health is going down, and compare that to the scenario where we got to our lines. I mean, he routs here and one more set of shots and he's dead. So we'll look at one last scenario where I think the Master Engineer might be not bad, and that has to do with just his unit size. He can start out front, get some shots, sneak behind our line, and go out into some really weird flanking positions. Well, weird, but he can get through the line and get flanking shots much more easily than, say, a unit of Thunders, because he's a lot more maneuverable, and your opponent might not even see your Master Engineer behind their line going to work. I mean, a lot of times when you're in a pitched battle, you split up your lines pretty significantly, and there's always little spaces for your characters to operate, so this might not be a bad way to use them. And I think I'll cut straight to the end plate so you can see the damage that he did. You can see here he actually did the most damage, got the most kills, and he was able to put that flanking fire on the most important unit that we were fighting into those Black Orcs. So again, another possible use of the Master Engineer, maybe. For these last two tests, I wanted to look at infantry, and basically I wanted to see if there's more or less effective ways of engaging the enemy infantry. So I have 2 units of Longbeard and 1 unit of Hammers, and the Orcs here have 1 unit of Black Orcs and 2 units of Big Guns. So I'm looking at an asymmetrical engagement where I take my Hammers and go up against the Big Guns and then try to roll them around to attack the Black Orcs in the back. And the next battle we'll actually see if we face power against power. We'll put our Hammers up against the Black Orcs and our Longbeards versus Big Guns to see if a symmetrical engagement will do better. I mean, we know the Hammers are going to beat the Black Orcs, but I'm just wondering, is it better to engage them asymmetrically, or is it better to engage them head on when you have a power advantage? And we can use that information in both ways. For example, if you know your units are going to, your most powerful units are going to lose head up to an enemy, are you better off to engage them with strength to strength, or to try and have an asymmetrical engagement? And we'll take a look at the end plates here and just take a look at the amount of kills and the amount of losses, and you can see it was a close victory and we did lose a lot of units, but we won. Now, as I said, in this scenario, I'm going to put the Hammers directly against the Black Orcs and the Longbeards versus the Big Guns, and we'll see what we do in this case. You know, is it going to be better or worse than the other scenario? And those Hammers, I mean, they're in a very expensive unit, but they plow through pretty much everything except for Chaos Chosen. But other than that, they're just devastating. You can see they just crushed the Black Orcs, and they're into the next units right away, right beside. And this battle is, I mean, proof positive. If you have an advantage with your powerful units, send them face to face. If you have a disadvantage, try and engage them asymmetrically so that you can hold out that engagement for a lot longer. And we'll take a look at the end plates, and you can see we had a decisive victory and we hardly lost anyone. Anyways, I hope that information was interesting, and I'll see you soon.